Morning.
Can I send you a motion? I already said that.
I'd like to make a motion. You know, moon.
No moon.
No moon.
No moon.
Too much.
Coming this way.
No, I want pizza bug.
It's raining around 4, I think.
Oh, yeah, the last I had seen it was gonna be cloudy all day. I didn't know what it predicted it. Yesterday I walked into the house, it had started to rain one block before I got there.
Can everyone hear us?
Like converting the AC platforms and throwing me off to NYCTRC, coming to church.
It's gonna happen.
I mean,
muted?
I should be keeping some Zoom here in the room in Dollar Green.
I can hear you.
Okay, great, thanks, Marisol.
Thanks
so much.
Because
Stuart.
literally,
Okay, anybody?
I'm surprised they all, I'm surprised. Why is that the FDA, the federal wire officer out there?
And then.
No, I took 2.
Oh,
Yeah.
AK, my mother, live in person. Oh, I don't know, I wasn't paying attention, I'm getting all these email fan clubs here from yesterday. Oh, Melissa, everyone is 13 cents wrong. July. CB 13.
Everyone wants.
No, they're not meeting in July.
No, me and Butch don't meet in July.
Huh? Oh. Brooklyn is not, Brooklyn CB 13 is not meeting. But they still told me to tell you they wanted to happy 4th of July. And they're very happy with the cute ring when you get the diamond going, the Diamond Energy Express. That's one thing everyone's happy. I call that the Q circle and the Q plus. And I call the regular Q diamond.
I'm gonna make
there's something,
More in my head.
Validated New York.
I'm calling it diamond.
Which law?
That's a bonus.
Very busy. Now anyone can carry anywhere.
Oh, I gotta call my
Especially
wife.
one's going towards the end line.
Got a
I'll be in
notification at
Coney
the
Island
end
in
of the
5 minutes.
I'm sorry?
She got a notification, like an email,
I don't know, I've been out all day, yeah, she's out all day.
the New York Post, somehow, political and everything.
It'll be the only thing on the news today.
You just only go to the registry. No.
This was the Supreme Court?
Are you kidding me? That's a suicide mission you just did.
Just news, a woman.
I was counting the unmasked people on the train coming down, not to carry the ones carrying guns.
So many fewer people are wearing masks.
Well, actually, I think it was, majority was still wearing them, but I found 3 or 4 in a row.
62% is the majority.
Jessica, we call Melissa the legendary.
Oh, is that what you call it?
Two rights and the price of one.
The third person's on here. Hey, Stuart, how are you?
Yeah.
We just see each other first.
Virtually.
Person.
He can get away from the office, he likes to make a guest appearance.
I'm glad to see you. Oh, Stuart.
I generally have been, that's the last
Yeah, no, you've been.
part, yeah.
Never your last meeting, you asked me when they're gonna do the Q train track work. I found. Yeah. Guess what
And
we,
the poster.
yeah, and you, but there's another one. When they do the weekend,
Yeah.
go to Stillwell, go to the Q Diamond Express. One way goes on the D Express, one way you're coming back from Manhattan, goes on the N Express. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Oh, that's gonna be a full train.
That's a leader.
Carry your jet.
No, that's.
Really?
So those things will.
Your jet, well,
Oh,
football season hasn't started.
no, thank goodness.
Yeah. Gotta get through
The express is
baseball.
for
Is
that
that too
weekend,
long?
'cause
Subway series.
we'll enjoy it, and then there will be, people saying, instead of them driving their car, they're going express, go boom, there,
Oh,
boom,
it's
back.
very lean back.
Yeah.
And it's always an accessible read. If you're a Kings Highway, go to the car, or take the queue around.
Hey, perfect.
Wow.
Yeah, Bay Park on the street.
Everybody on screen here.
Yeah, great.
As submitted, you mean? Yes. I don't think we all want to hear them. No. All right, so, let me start with, the Bronx bus redesign, will be kicking off on the 26th, which is just days away, obviously. There are many, many improvements from the previous, last year's Bronx bus redesign, and, to their credit, buses and New York City Transit, listened to, riders who had issues, steep hill issues with some of the reroutes, lack of connections, and a variety of other things. And I believe, just looking at the new Bronx bus redesign map, which is beautiful, if you haven't had a chance to see it, it's amazing. It's really user-friendly. You can see that there are lots more buses to subways, to commuter train stations. There have been some shortenings of routes, and there obviously are some percent fewer stops because they're trying to speed the buses up. I don't believe the spacing of stops on the Bronx bus redesign is anywhere near as onerous as it was initially, which kicked off a real stoop. It really kicked off a lot of steam from Staten Islanders when that distances are greater there. There are more options in the Bronx, so I think this will go over pretty darn well. I'm going to be an ambassador one evening and speak to riders on a route and see how they feel about it. But it should be a very interesting thing. Lisa, you were at the kickoff.
I was.
Wearing football shoes or anything, or? No?
No, but I was wearing a big button, and that said, asked me about bus redesign, and on my way back, but he asked me about bus redesign.
You wore it all the way back?
Right.
Oh, my God, what punishment.
That was actually interesting, and, so I had some material with me and was able to share it with them. So people were,
Were these Bronx bus riders, or?
well, it was on the Lex line after we came back. But there were definitely people who were interested in asking for more information, riders at Fordham, at the station, who were asking for more information while there.
One of the interesting and maybe more controversial pieces of the Bronx bus redesign is that the M100 bus, which used to come from Washington Heights down the west side and across 125th Street into the Bronx, will now end on the west side, and there will be a new M100 that will, 125, 125 that will go into the Bronx. So,
Lisa, do you have an extra one of those buttons? But I don't know if you know, but I collect all
I will
kinds of
get-
buttons, and I have a huge transit collection. One of these days, I'll bring in here.
This will
Going
might,
back to
this
the.
might physically double the size of your collection. These are big buttons.
No, I know they are. No, I know it's a
We'll get you one.
3-incher. It's a 3-incher.
Yeah.
If you can get me one.
Yeah.
Andrew,
I would appreciate it. Thank you
Yeah,
very
Stuart.
much.
can I ask a quick question? So, generally, school season winds down, they rationalize the bus schedules for the summer. So we're launching this new initiative. Are there any plans to, let's say, resurvey Bronx riders at a certain interval, just to see, the summer may not be representative exactly, but, just to get some feedback on, because they have an ability to tweak it if it's, it's.
I watched and read some of the releases after the kickoff, and it said they will be watching and they will reassess should that become necessary.
Actually, yeah, Rich Davy was asked, basically, is this carved in stone? And he said, no, we're gonna assess and we're gonna make changes as we see necessary.
So that may be something we want to jump on the bandwagon. If there is no systematic way that people are reporting it, maybe we want to put something on our website that says, something to that, share your thoughts.
Yeah, Marisol, you're on here, right? I see your name. Will your
Yes,
office-
I'm here.
Okay, great. Will you let us know if your office gets feedback on any particular routes as a result of the redesign?
Sure, absolutely. One thing that they have been good about is taking the feedback and trying to find a way to make it work. So I'm encouraged by that. We'll keep monitoring the routes, so see what complaints are coming up. I know it's going to be mostly about the loss of bus stops, but we'll figure that out too.
Some of the routes now go across what you might call more major streets than they used to. Like a bus that was in the 180s is now on Tremont, or will be on the 26th. So whether that speeds it up or slows it down remains to be seen. We will see, certainly.
There was definitely talk about the east-west corridor connections, as to connect to the north-south.
Did you happen to notice if I started to look at the map and just something happened and I stopped, but do you notice if, and it's years away, but if the routes serve proposed and access, New Haven line stations?
So one of the questions, that had been asked, of Kate, I think last time she was here, was about whether, they would be serving in Queens, whether, about new development, right? And the answer was that once they come online, they will. That they will look to see. Now, obviously, where there are major, healthcare centers and schools and other facilities that are in those areas, so there should be beefing up service already. So, that's absolutely something we need to keep an eye on as well.
Andrew, Lisa, there was one discussed, they did mention last time, Kate said, that the Q44 Select was supposed to be extended to where you were, Lisa, at the press conference at Fordham Plaza, because it will make it easier for them, also easier to terminate there better than where the Bronx Zoo, because where they really terminate is really far back from the Bronx Zoo. But where it's run, where it's supposed to run, it's supposed to go a different street, so it makes it easier for people to get from there to Fordham Plaza. And that's also connected to the Metro North train now, when we had our press conference.
Right.
This might be a good opportunity. But we have not seen on the redesign for Queens being any changes for the Q44 in Queens.
So the Queens redesigners, they're still taking everything back,
Agreed.
digesting.
Agreed.
Lots of, from what I wrote back with Kate, and we spoke a little bit about the Queens redesign, and she said that they, initially they'd gotten 11,000 comments the first time around. And this time, for the Queens redesign, they have gotten substantially fewer comments. And that and maybe that means that everybody loves it.
You're more likely to comment if you don't like something, I'm guessing.
Right. Or maybe, I suggested perhaps it's an opportunity to reach back out to the electeds and see what they're hearing. Do we have a hand? I think we have several hands.
David, go ahead.
Two things. One concern I have about is the outreach, the amount of how they're doing outreach. They're doing outreach from Sunday, June 12th till Sunday, June 26th. It's not even, none of these outreach locations are on the MTA website.
For the Bronx redesign?
Yeah.
Well, Andrew's doing it later than that.
I'm doing it later. They go beyond the 26th. I'm doing mine on the 29th, so I know.
They're not on the MTA website.
Their locations?
Locations are not on the MTA website.
I will look at that.
Lastly, Manchester, Port Morrison, no transit desert, yet nothing will change.
I'm surprised to hear about Baychester. I mean, you can sort of walk to the 5 train, but whatever. It's not as much a desert as other places, but I'll look into that.
What to do.
I'll look into that. Mr. X?
I was unaware of the 621 press conference on the Fort Plaza. I was noticed on the MTA website yesterday. Everyone emailed to me. And buses running between Marlboro and Chicago and Queens. Q44, Q54, those 2 days. Either Marlboro, double A, like to travel to any Queens entering X. Understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yes,
Travel between
meaning-
Marlboro and Queens through the head at the clock.
And you may have heard, we have been advocating for a Bronx to LaGuardia Airport route because a lot of employees live in the Bronx.
What they need to do is going to be in 41.
Okay.
This is what they need to do. They need to, everyone going to Waterford, they see one going towards, Marciana Station.
What station did you say?
Marciana.
Oh, Marcia.
Because you got 12 Bridge.
Brooklyn.
Once
That's
you
Brooklyn.
enter Queens, hold on, once you enter Queens, from the 12 Bridge, you got the President Parkway, you got the DQB, the Marciana Station, which is Rochester Festival. You go further down towards, J Street Road, J Street Mexican.
That may be addressed, well, clearly, if it wasn't just in the Bronx, if it's gonna terminate in Brooklyn, then we have to, keep an eye on the Brooklyn redesign when that kicks off. Okay.
Yeah, because it was next, but then you leave Marlboro, enter Queens first, and Brooklyn Central, enter in the head.
I sure hope it's not using the BQE, because any bus that uses the BQE is destined to failure. That is so crowded and slow, it's unreal.
It's also a truck line.
Well, hopefully there's going to be the beginnings of some redesign of the BQE.
And one route in the Queens
Place.
redesign uses the
And-
Southeast Coast, that's
Yes.
the Q68,
Go ahead, Trudy.
Mr. X, no, well, 2 things. Mr. X, I'm assuming, you always refer to my borough. I'm assuming you're referring to Brooklyn?
Wrong.
Oh, it's the Bronx is your borough?
Yeah.
Okay, just for the record, so that we have it. So you are from the Bronx? Oh, okay, all these years, and I've never known. Okay, no, the other thing is, just for the record, you're talking about the BQE, and you may know that there is going to be the beginnings of some redesign or preliminary design, especially in Brooklyn Heights, where it's now 3 tiers high, and it's just almost impossible, to navigate or to get anywhere on. So that is beginning. It'll be a long, long
They're taking a
time.
lane away in order to reduce the weight on the structure. So
Well-
it's even more crowded now than it was.
Yeah, no, but they are also trying to do some, it's a whole long McGill that they're going through, but at least they're paying attention to the problems which have been ongoing since I lived in Brooklyn, which is a long time ago.
Okay. So moving along, the next item is the new, quote, partnership, unquote, between the City of New York and the MTA. This is good news, especially since there's been no love lost between the city and Albany in the previous administration. But now that everybody is getting along, and the city would like to see buses move faster, so they're going to do a number of things to help buses move faster. More cameras in bus lanes, more bus lanes. They're also going to work on the countdown clocks and make them more efficient. Some of them do sort of not give the right message at times. So that's great news. More enforcement of existing bus lanes, working with the state to get so many, what's the word I'm looking for? So many violations from violating a bus lane, and you might lose your license or get a hefty.
More cameras, enforcement for bus lanes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I hope that they are really serious about this, because this would be great news. Michael?
What was announced, I just want you to know what was announced this morning. I don't know.
One
But
second.
there are also going to be cameras.
I know about that. That's coming later. Hold on. Michael?
Anyway, speaking of bus lanes and, countdown clocks, I advocate for them to, around my neighborhood, right, in Far Rockaway, on Cedar Boulevard, from Fresh Road and Beach 9, definitely should have bus lanes where Q113 and 114 goes on, and also, like to see countdown clocks, especially around my area at Beach 9th Street and Cedar Boulevard on both sides, and plus the other two stops, which is mine Coronado Avenue on both sides, and, on my avenue, where the library is on Central Avenue, and / Beach 20th, I told DOT I like to see countdown clocks on those stops.
Well, a lot of people would like to see more countdown clocks for the buses. There have been occasions when the transmitter was not transmitting, and thus a bus showed up that was not on the countdown clock. You know, you might see it, a 20-minute wait, and you go, oh my God, and you walk away, but actually there's one coming. So I've talked to Frank Anacaro about that, and given him, when that's happened, the number of the bus, and they investigate that. So if you happen to see a bus show up, not a not-in-service bus, but a bus that's in service, but it didn't show up on an existing countdown clock, make note of the vehicle number. That's very important.
Oh, yeah.
Very important. Thank you. Deborah Grice?
Yes, thank you. I have an issue with some of the countdown clocks. The reason is, you can't always see them because there's other signs in their way. When we're walking, like I'm going to the train station, and I'm trying to figure out where's the clock, where is that sign? And I can't because this sign's all over the place.
That's DOT, not transit, as you know.
Inside the train station?
Oh, you're talking subway countdown clocks. We're talking bus countdown clocks.
I'm also talking about, well, DOT I've been complaining to, and we know they're not listening. It's also with the countdown clocks and the subways too. It's very hard to find it at times because their signage is broken.
Don't say DOT isn't listening. If you go through your community board,
I am on my community board.
so am I, and they listen to us.
Oh, well, I'm glad they listen to you guys, because in Brooklyn, we have one person, when she's on, it's to the point where when she leaves, we're all going, forget it, she ain't listening, because we all have to go above their head. They don't listen to us. Only one person we could work with, he's wonderful, she won't say her name.
Oh, well.
I understand exactly what you're saying,
Yep.
and I do know how to do this, but we have not always had the success. They don't want it. Person, she won't listen to what we're saying.
If you are not having luck with your representative from DOT, why don't you go to the borough commissioner?
We do,
You do that too?
yes.
And no luck there either?
Well, we've gotten a little bit of help, but if people below that person would learn to listen and not be so difficult, it would be a lot better for all of us in our borough.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Your ex? That's not state law yet, but, I think they're trying to make it tougher for sure.
They're doing progressive enforcement, so that if you have repeat violations,
Yes.
so the fine would be, greater.
Yeah, yeah.
The next offense.
Absolutely.
They have a statistic that if you get one violation in the bus lane, you're, much less likely to get a second one, and extremely less likely to get a third one, because the fines go up.
Right.
It's like the numbers are really impressive, but,
Oh, that's something.
yeah. But as Craig Cipriano says, are you a bus? You're not a bus, stay out of the bus lane.
So I guess most everybody has heard about the settlement of the ADA lawsuit against the MTA. There's a lot of good things in that settlement. It will take a long time. Make 95% of the stations, not 100, but 95%, accessible. I looked at the list in one of the, I guess it was either the New York one and a newspaper, in the releases that we get this morning. And there's a very impressive list of stations that will be made accessible. Yes, it's going to take time, but it's the right thing to do. It's like Quaker Oats. It's the right thing to do. Remember that commercial? I'm really giving my age away there. And
Yes, I do.
yeah, and
You just gave me.
this agreement actually makes it even more important that congestion pricing come online, because those billions of dollars that are necessary to make those stations accessible are not going to come if we don't get congestion pricing. And if an elected official decides that we should not get congestion pricing, then you have to come up with an alternative for that amount of money to the MTA's capital program, because we cannot let the system fall apart. We cannot not make it accessible. There's no excuse. Unfortunately, I've heard many of the gubernatorial people, campaigning candidates, both, not a lot on the Republican side, but not all. And I've heard maybe one on the Democratic side not so enthusiastic about congestion pricing. So it is really important. Somebody who's really up on the details of what's going on with congestion pricing is Trudy, and I want Trudy to give a little update. I'm taking the issue of congestion pricing a little out of order on my report, because it sort of feeds into this new ADA settlement. So, Trudy.
Okay. Well, first of all, on the ADA settlement, and it was on New York One this morning, it was really funny because they played out how long it's going to take for all the stations, and it'll be in 2055. And one of the reporters, her husband does all of the news, media stuff. Anyway, she said, and Jana was on there, so this comes right from the horse's mouth, as it were. There have been a lot of stuff.
The chairman's mouth, as it were.
Yeah, that's nice.
That's a lot nicer. that's an old expression. It's not meant as a derogatory term or anything.
No, we're kidding.
Okay, anyway, basically, during the so-called debates, and there obviously was some misunderstanding because, Kathy, Governor Hochul, when speaking about congestion pricing, and Janet cleared it up somewhat this morning, and she said that it wasn't going to happen for
At least a year.
at least a year because of all of that the feds were asking, and I checked into that, and it was really just the classic, form, check column A, check column B, not anything that should have taken a lot more time. Yes, there were about 400 questions on the thing. Jano clarified and made it quite clear that he had spoken with Kathy since she made that statement, and basically he gave that this was going to go ahead as quickly as possible because of the, I'm going to check it out some more, but there is general agreement that congestion pricing is needed for both the financial reasons and, I sound like how many years have I been saying this already? For financial reasons, but also in terms of its name, congestion, to stop some of the traffic congestion, especially as we are moving ahead with more bus lanes as well as more, and Andrew, don't have a fit about this, more bike lanes and other.
And open streets.
Yeah. But because of that, it is even more important that we have less motor vehicle traffic on the streets.
And it's environmentally good sense as well.
Exactly. So right now, the congestion pricing will be moving ahead, at least as of this morning. And all of these things are subject to change because for those of you who know, I've been talking about congestion pricing since the days of Sam Schwartz or even earlier. I think Sam first brought it up, and he and I spoke about it, and then I brought it up. It's got to be at least 5 or 6 years. And but it is going to happen. It's just a matter of sooner rather than later. And I was very glad this morning to hear that Jano and Kathy have been in conversation about this since various quote-unquote debates. And we're trying to keep it, and this is coming from me, we're trying to keep it as non-political, Andrew, as possible. So I'm not talking about the Republican point of view or the Democratic point of view or anything else. And
I've heard some of the candidates come out specifically against it. It is
Well,
an election year, I understand that.
let's see what happens. All I'm saying is, in referring to it, and as I said, this is coming from me, but it's a question of what is the best for the city, and very important, it's not only that Kathy is so much for it, but Eric Adams, our mayor. Eric is absolutely for congestion pricing, so that it helps to have our elected officials in favor or very enthusiastic about it. So that's basically the situation
Excellent. Thank you,
right
Trudy.
now.
A quick question.
Sure.
Just circling back to what the original topic was, which was the ADA
Yeah.
settlement and funding, I think it's our responsibility to ensure that funding is set aside from whatever stream, for maintaining and cleaning of the escalators or elevators that are going to be added to the system. They cannot maintain what they're doing now. We know that there are issues. So, on the personal services side of the coin, not just the capital side, I think we really need to be on record making sure they account for that. And also, have they started to take a look at the assumptions again, given that fuel is rising, the cost of fuel is rising and not going down anytime soon, whether the revenue that they anticipate from that scheme, if it's ever imposed, whether it's going to bear the fruit that you want. I think they should start looking at that again, too.
As far as the setting aside money, this agreement dedicates 14.7% of every MTA capital program to these accessibility issues.
Right, but I'm talking about other than capital, because you have to maintain the system that you're creating. And we know right now that elevators are horrific, escalators break down and they're long
I
waits.
thought you were gonna say escalators are terrific, but you didn't.
They can be. But, no, the condition of elevators could be pretty.
And the reason some of our elevator issues are what they are some people are bringing incredibly heavy things into them that they were not designed for. Like, I've seen, people with hand trucks and huge loads, that's not what they were designed for.
So this is, that was something that, Jenna was asked about yesterday. And, part of, specifically, he was asked at the breakfast I attended at the Citizens Union breakfast, he was asked about the maintenance of the elevator.
Right.
Specifically the ones, under Zeckendorf Towers at Union Square. And, those which always go off. And he said, unfortunately, those are privately maintained escalators and have always been a problem. So they're gonna be, keeping a better eye on those escalators and in those kind of agreements with the private developers. The other, thing that he spoke about, maybe, Chris, I don't know if this was at the press conference or if it was earlier, because you talked about it at both events, was that they're more, and this is a term, an Andy Byford term of art too, right, off the rack, that they're less, state-of-the-art, unique, different kinds of parts and components for every one, but that they're more consistent, that can be used across different, things, so that they are able to be interchangeable with parts. The other thing he said, which is really interesting, was that as soon as the MTA trains new escalator and elevator repair people, they're snatched up by so that's a real concern, and, that's, I don't know if that's a pay scale or what it is, but that's
Right.
something that they're looking at also.
Lisa, if I
Thank you,
could just add to that, and again, going back into ancient history. Originally, I've spoken here about the Adopt a Station program and getting public-private money into it. And initially, elevators and escalators, before, when the disability community first was getting its voice, I'm going back like 20 or 30 years even, that one of the things that was done, and an example of that is the Union Square station, and also the 68th Hunter College station, where there are also problems with accessibility. And that's why a lot of there is now a way to go through Hunter College and get on their escalators when they're working to get upstairs. That they don't advertise it, but people know. But the problem is that in order to get these, which were then called amenities, into these stations from the private sector, you try to get money out of the private sector, and that has sort of continued on a lot of different projects. And there have been always difficulties, because they say, hey, don't bother us, we gave this to you, and we can't make sure that it's working all the time. I won't name various private companies that have done that, but it continues to be a problem, which is why the elevators and escalators, where possible, are now part of, paid for by the MTA. And to answer your other question, one of the things with congestion pricing and financing is that money and the full, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but that the dollar amount is one of the things, how much it will be charged and who will be charged.
Yes. Who will be exempt,
and
what days
how
of
much,
the week, what times of the day,
how
all
much
of that.
money will be coming in from congestion pricing. And once that is determined, and it will be determined, some of that money is supposed to go for maintenance, in not only elevators and escalators, but other areas that need ongoing
It was
maintenance.
gonna raise
and care.
about $1.3 billion, which would allow the MTA to bond and get up to about 10 or 11 billion a year towards the 52 to 55 billion dollar capital
Right, but
program.
it still has not been absolutely, set in,
No, none of that is set.
yeah, exactly.
I thought, yeah, Michael.
Yes, speaking of being split, right? Air elevators need to be restored. And, I also would like to see the 4, 5, and 6 lines that have elevator on both sides also.
To the platform.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know that you're talking about the 4 and the 5 and 6 line?
Yeah.
You know there's issues with the curves and all of that kind of stuff. That's quite an unusual station. It's not your normal. But yeah, I hear you.
No, that's why I use that as an example, because that was one of the first ones that had elevators and escalators of any kind. And it was, as I said, at that time, they were called amenities, quote unquote, rather than what is it. And, there are ongoing, discussions, is that a good word? With the private sector people about keeping them in a state of good repair or whatever, and that goes on, as far as I know, to this day.
Let's talk a little more quickly if we can, as we have a lot to cover and our guests will be coming. So, Mr. X?
So general, presentation, several meetings, and certain items, elevators, but we haven't done that so far. Yeah, and on that preface, Lisa mentioned I was there, and again,
In a jacket.
he can't like a black hat. What he does here. All was, that Murphy spent more time speaking to him than he spent more time speaking to us.
Okay. So, let me touch on the safety issue. Instances of some of the bad crimes that we've seen have receded somewhat. You all have, I'm sure, seen the 1 day's worth of single police officer patrolling after a police officer was attacked at the Pennsylvania Avenue station of the 3 line. That changed again, and now they will be in pairs. They will not be next to each other. They will be within eyesight of each other. They could be in the same train and visible to each other down. If you can look through, you're not going around a curve, you might be able to see another car. Also, they could be on opposite platforms in a station, but they will still be in pairs, and they will still be visible to their partner. And the idea was to increase coverage area, which still do, but will hopefully keep them safe as well. There are people that look for single officers and think it's a simple thing to attack them. So, I haven't seen officers on the trains now for quite a while. I do see occasional officers in stations, but I'm hopeful that we will see more. I'm glad this issue has been worked out to both the PBA and the mayors and the MTA's agreement, because everybody has to get along on this. We must keep our riders safe. So, the last thing I want to talk about, and then Lisa will bring up the news of the day. Actually, why don't you bring that up, Lisa? That's going to be a fairly lengthy discussion, I have a feeling, and I want to be done in time for Demetrius, so.
Okay. You may know that the Supreme Court ruling, Supreme Court issued a ruling this morning, Trudy, I know you know, on the concealed carry and the New York's concealed carry ruling on regulations and permits, and basically struck down as too restrictive. And this is not something that was unanticipated, but it's certainly something that is alarming. And we sent out the statement that we've issued to all of the members. and I'll just, for those of you who haven't seen it, we said there are already too many weapons in our transit system, and we're extremely disappointed with what we're planning to change concealed carry laws in New York means for riders. In fact, we're alarmed. After the spate of recent shootings, riders have made it clear that they do not feel safer or comfortable with people more easily bringing guns into the transit system. The state, city, and MTA should continue to ban guns on transit, continue to fight against ghost guns and other illegal weapons. We urge the governor and mayor to pass laws emphasizing this ban, similar to laws the governor recently passed in anticipation of Roe v. Wade being overturned. The mayor is having a press conference now, and actually probably just finished it, and the governor just spoke about calling the legislature back to Albany to put into place laws that they can put into place that would ban, I don't know if we're allowed to use the word ban, bar concealed weapons from large gathering places. As I said to somebody before, they do that in Texas. They can do it in Texas. They can do that in New York. You can't bring a concealed weapon into Olive Garden in Texas, or at least in places I've been.
Even if it's not crowded?
Even if it's not crowded. I think it's based on occupancy. The governor and mayor both said that they're going to be looking at what they can do to mitigate what this means and to address those potentially disastrous outcomes. The police commissioner has said that nothing changes today. So we'll keep an eye on this. It's something we've been prepared for, so we didn't have to pull something together from scratch. But we hope, that it was a bad dream.
The MTA still has the right to ban weapons from its system, and with some new technologies, hopefully better, less sensitive, but more weapon-oriented metal detectors, which they're going to test and which other systems have tested, they are within their right to do that, correct?
That will depend on state law also.
No, well,
And state and city regulation. But those metal detectors require staffing of at least 2 people per device. So that's millions of dollars of equipment and multi-millions of dollars of personnel that could, some would argue, be used for service and reliability and other improvements to the system.
You're saying that staffing issue because you're thinking if the alarm is set off, somebody has to be there to apprehend the person, whereas it's possible they could just take a picture of the person and distribute it and then catch the person at a different place, correct?
No, they go hand in hand. Those are private enterprise system that uses staffing to go with it, and it's their staff.
Lisa, this is Bradley.
Bradley,
how are you feeling?
Not so great. That's why I'm in Hollywood Squares today. But I just wanted to add to what Lisa said, and I don't, forgive me, Lisa, if I didn't hear you say this, but the mayor had said that the legal experts, they're going to be doing a comprehensive review and trying to understand what sensitive locations mean. And hopefully that means sensitive locations such as the transit system. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah,
Or school.
thank you.
Bradley, thank you. That's exactly what I was going to say, that there is one term in the ruling that was left very vague, and it was about not carrying weapons, guns, in quote-unquote sensitive locations. And the question going on right now, and there are some people, including people with the mayor, who are saying, well, basically, New York is all of New York, or at least New York City, is a sensitive location. But especially places like Times Square, and specifically they mentioned the whole subway system as a quote-unquote sensitive, no, but it's that term which they, what's his name, who wrote the ruling, who purposely left it out. And the lawyers who know a lot, I'm not a lawyer, I just hang around with a lot of them, but that is the term that is now under question, but especially as it relates to New York City, and they specifically mentioned Times Square and the subway system as should be defined as quote-unquote sensitive locations. So Bradley, thank you very much for bringing that up.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Mr. X.
Well, we just heard, we're talking about it, about what they're looking at their legal recourses, see what they can do about, what they can declare in New York at least as sensitive locations. We're hoping so.
You're dating yourself, Mr. X.
They're not doing anything currently.
I would disagree, but we'll find out how fast Albany gets back, or the legislature gets back to Albany.
Well, some of it can also be
It can be remote.
before there can be some things that the mayor and/or the governor can do directly without it being state law. And there were some laws put in anticipation of this ruling. I mean, it's not a shock to anybody that it's just a question of when it was coming down. And I'm not familiar with exactly what they say, but again, there are a number of Supreme Court lawyers right now and who know how to deal with this kind of thing, who are going over word by word and punctuation point by punctuation point.
And Demetrius may be able to shed some additional light on it.
Yeah.
And just as we were talking about safety and security as part of all of this, there are some new surveillance cameras that have been installed on, I think, 55 subway cars. Early reports are that they give a very, very clear image. And so they're not real-time cameras. They just record people. And the recordings can be surveyed later on if something happens. So we expect there will be a lot more of these. They are invisible to the rider, so nobody knows where these cameras are. So that's great news. Yes, Mr. X.
Yeah, it would be nice if that had been done in the 1970s.
They would be outdated by now.
It would be outdated.
Yeah, it wouldn't
There's a lot of things that would have been
technology, but it would have been good if we had it then, too.
Andrew?
Absolutely. Christopher D. Gripe?
Yes, sir. Question for you, sir. Well, do we know what lines these cameras are gonna be?
No, and I doubt that they will say either.
Right.
Is it, you thinking maybe if we on the newer cars?
They're not announcing.
They're not gonna say.
They announced
Yeah.
that they are not announcing where they're going to be.
Of course.
That was a
That's the whole
specific
idea.
part. You don't know, so maybe you'll be a little more careful.
Not me, I'm careful.
Chris was like, I'm a good guy, I got nothing to worry about.
My mouth that has to be watched.
No, I was gonna say, well, not, wanted Andrew.
So that's my report. Lisa, did you want to update us on some things before our speaker arrives, which is momentary, I believe?
Just a moment. Responding to a question in the chat. Okay. We've asked if, we're able to weigh in on what can be declared a sensitive location. I said, I don't know about that, but we do know that we want transit, all of transit.
No, that has already been designated, if you want the word, that the whole subway system is considered a sensitive location. So if we want to add our voice, say we agree, but I think that it's sort of common knowledge or assumption that would be called a sensitive location.
And buses as well.
Of course.
And Long Island Railroad Metro.
And railroad.
So, speaking of, the system as a whole, this has been, it's a very busy time. As you heard, we kicked off the Bronx bus redesign launch yesterday, with, up in the Bronx, which was received well by Bronxites. And then came back for the ADA announcement, which was very well received by many, although we all wish it would happen sooner, but that's, it's happening sooner than it would have without the agreement, so that's great news. Last night, there was a hearing on Penn Access eminent domain, that we testified about in support of the Penn Access project. That's what brings Metro North down to the Bronx. There were a number of people who had concerns about noise, who were located in Queens, and were calling for sound buffers and barriers, but who also wanted a Queens stop, which we had asked in our testimony for consideration of such, or perhaps connector to IBX. But acknowledging that eminent domain is always an unfortunate action, but that the progress that it makes towards the development of this project is a positive outcome. Starting tonight, the public information sessions for the service plan to the Long Island Railroad service to Grand Central that will come about as a result of the East Side Access Project. How's that? That public outreach begins tonight. There are 3 one-hour outreach sessions. And my understanding is there'll be a presentation. There will then be an opportunity for some Q&A, but there will be 1 2-hour session on July 13th, which is more of a robust back and forth. And you've all seen our statement in which we've called for more of those kinds of sessions. And not only have we said that publicly, I've said that privately in my conversations with people here at
And we're the only
MTA.
ones that have raised the issue of if so much of the Brooklyn service is going to be relegated to shuttle status, then you must plan on people who have a seat on their train, whether it's to Grand Central, Madison, or Penn Station, would stay on rather than have a 3-seat ride to Lower Manhattan and then get on an already overcrowded, hopefully they are by then, overcrowded subway train. You have to plan on these things.
And just one last thing. And tomorrow is because this is a Penn week, right? That's Penn and Teller, right? Tomorrow there's
some magic.
Yeah.
We need a lot of magic.
Tomorrow the State Senate is holding a hearing on Penn Station, the Penn Station project. We will be testifying on Penn Station reconstruction, which is the transit component of Penn Station, 6 Penn Station. There are lots of different aspects of that broader project, including the project to the east, the project to the south. We're really mostly concerned with fixed Penn Station now, which is what the governor kicked off a week or so ago, and which is of real importance to making sure that it's the place people want to get to when they have the option. So it's definitely a lot of Penn, but a lot of transit, which is good that that's happening, and it's an opportunity for us to continue to remind people that this is all going to be just pushed back, unless congestion pricing starts to happen. So.
All important issues.
I don't want everybody to think, but I'm going to say something totally positive right now, starting with Lisa and Brad and Kara. I want to thank you all for all the work that you did and taking all of our views into consideration on the East, as well as changing the name back to the name it should have, the East Side Access, our East Side Access press release, etc. Because I put it in writing in my email, but I just wanted to go on the record here right now in our minutes that all of you doing
Thank
such
you.
a wonderful job in incorporating all of our thoughts and making a document that was not only said what we wanted to say, but eminently readable. So,
Thank you.
I don't know if I'm speaking for everybody else on the PCAC and the TRC, but certainly for myself, it was a job well done, and I just want to give you a big thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
It was eminently readable because they were dealing with eminent domain.
Well, that was a different pen.
You know something, I purposely was not going to say that, but I'm glad you did, because
Somebody
every
had
once in a while, somebody had to, yes,
Someone had to
exactly.
really do
Commissioner
it.
Double A.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that the team did a masterful job reading in the comments. But you had circulated an article that, was very enlightening, and I had a follow-up question with you. I didn't hear back on capacity, meaning even, you know, because if there are pressures that we want to relieve on the subway system and not create new, bottlenecks with the different service patterns, through service to Brooklyn, whether it's for people working in Brooklyn or whether it's people going to sports venues or other activities,
Or Lower Manhattan.
or even Lower Manhattan coming in that way, would the railroad even have the rolling stock and staff to add additional through trains? Because the article you sent talked about even a reduction in the number of trains, a slight reduction from what we have now.
Yeah, it was quite an enlightening article, I thought.
LIR today.
Yeah, NIRR today.
Right. So I think we, you know, it impacts us as
Raised
the
a lot
rider
of good
council
questions.
as well as the PCAC, and I think we should stick with that line of questioning.
Do you know the schedule for M9 deliveries for the LIRR?
They've been, further delayed.
That's Kawasaki again?
I have to check.
I think they delayed the
What
211.
is, do you remember what they said?
They got issues all of a sudden.
Excuse me, I have that answer, because I was with Hector today, because we were testing the elevators at Jamaica.
Did you bring heavy hand trucks in them?
No, I brought a walker, is that better?
My
Ron
walk.
Troy has a question.
No, I brought a walker in. No, but the answer to your question with the M9A, they were, discussing, because the new M9s are already being tested, because we did pass one, passing on platform F, which we were on, and there was one, but one says testing saying 10 station sign. So they are running.
Oh, I know, you can see them at Hillside Yard if you go.
Yeah, and they're also being reprogrammed for Grand Central, you know what I mean, the news station. I'm just gonna go that way. But, I'm just going that way, because I don't want Andrew to start getting headaches again. But the bottom line is, regarding the M9A, they're still waiting for a date for them, because first they said it was a year, now it's more, because of COVID and congestion on the boats.
Indeed.
We have been joined by our guest, and why don't we take the other questions after our esteemed visitor has.
Very fortunate to have our Senior VP of Subways, Demetrius Critchlow, join us today. I think the topic I saw that you wanted to speak largely about is a topic that's on many of our minds, because the past few weekends, for the first time in a long time, when you check the status of some trains, I saw that dreaded notice. You may be seeing delays because we're running as much service as we can with the crews we have available, and we thought that was, you know, the heart of COVID time, but we're sort of surprised to see it again. So happy to hear an update on that and other things. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Love this esteemed group, so.
We also spoke before about the ruling today, so.
Okay. Thank you. Sure. So, I think we'll start with where we were. It will take us to where we are. Have to answer your questions, as well once we get there.
Let me make sure. Can everybody on Zoom hear Demetrius?
Speak up just a little bit,
Yes.
please.
We'll just move the mic over.
Hello, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'd like to share some slides for Demetrius's presentation, but there we go. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it.
Great.
All right, can you go to full screen, Lucas?
Thank you. All right, so, we created just for you. So we'll start off with some of the pandemic-related issues that caused us to get to where we are, which essentially ended up with having a short cruise, for road and revenue service. The hiring freeze was one that we say was a necessary evil. It was, a challenging time where we didn't know where we were going to be fiscally, but ultimately, we had a hiring freeze as a result. We had increased attrition, number of folks who were retiring at the same time. People kind of held on with the hope that there was going to be this buyout during this period, but after a while, it became clear that there would not. We had a number of folks that were quarantined or sick, and just being able to handle the amount of increased service because we had cut service because of COVID, and then increased service in June 2020, but we still held on to reduced service in the CNF, which kind of allowed us to be able to, kind of stay steady on the cruise space. We didn't have the ridership then to really even have any sustainable complaints about it. Whatever service we operated was pretty decent at the time. To make things more difficult, we had social distancing requirements. Our classrooms are very small. That limited our capacity to train people when we actually did have the opportunity to bring them back on. The time periods that we have for people to train, 8 months for a train operator, 3 months for a conductor, or what we need, there was very little opportunity to adjust that, but we'll talk about what we did to be able to handle that. And then we had several hundred vacancies during that period. The number 326 train operators was interesting to me. That is the exact number of train operators that LA Metro utilizes to operate their system. And we had that many people out at the peak period. So just to give you an idea of how much of a challenge what type of challenge we were dealing with to handle that. And on average, at the peak, we had 632 delays due to crew availability during that period. So we did a couple of things from both the administrative, operationally, and then analytically to try to tackle the task. It was a challenge, but I think the team did an amazing job of responding. The first thing they did was from an administrative capacity, from an administrative side, they looked at what we can do to increase getting the crews on within a shorter period of time. So rehiring train service supervisors, folks that had just left the organization. We talked about that attrition increase and taking advantage of these folks that had just retired and saying, hey, come back to the organization. We could use you to train some of these new folks. We found that we got some decent response back, not as many on the operating side, but we definitely got enough to increase the hiring pool for classes. So because we got these TSSs, we were able to increase our train operator classes from 40 in 2019 to 70 or 80 classes. In June of 2022 is the highest that I can remember, 110 people in class as of June. So when we talk about efforts to try to ramp up hiring, like we have been hitting the road hard, even though we've had some things that have been working against us. We have the train operators program is built to have folks in school, a good portion, then they come to yard service. They spend a good amount of time kind of handling the train, understanding what the train operates, what the stopping distance is. They get a good feel for the operation. Then they go back into training. Then they go back into training, and they feel more comfortable.
West approaching New York, you are on the fastest.
Sorry.
So no worries. So then they go back into training to learn, like now I'm going into road service, what do I need to do? I now have experience operating a train. And we found that people, when they get that yard experience of actually operating a train, they're better once they hit the road. When they spent the time up front and then hit the road, we found that there were more operating infractions as a result. So it's a great program operationally, but the challenge is it puts people in the road, it puts people in the yard and gives the appearance that we have, because now we don't have to fill the yard jobs, right? So the yard people will now go to the road and it seems like, oh, they're doing all right, everything's great. But once those folks go back into training, the people from the road now go back to the yard jobs, and we still have the same challenge until they're fully out of school. So that's just some of the ebbs and flows that you'll see with the train operators specifically. We offered a buyback program to incentivize people to come back. We were actively working with the union to try to look through what could we do to make it more feasible for people to work these overtime jobs. Could we offer people who currently own a job in the yard to work on their regular scheduled day outside of the yard? Because once they pick a job, that's their job, right? They don't have to leave the yard, but maybe we can incentivize them to leave the yard to work the road. Can we ask people who are cross-trained, people who are trained in the A division to operate in the B division, or people who are trained in the B division to operate in the A division? Can we utilize them on overtime to cover jobs? So we really tried to utilize the best that we could all of the folks that were available. At the same time, we had to make some changes on the operating side. We adjusted the crews, the schedules for the crews to have more trips per tour. So how can we maximize the existing crews that we have and still operate service? We lengthened some of the tours. So usually for a train operator, you only have the ability, I think it's 9 hours, 10 hours of operating time. We increased it to 11 to just stretch it just a little bit to get more trips for train. We offered existing crews overtime to run additional trips after their tours were completed. We took folks that were construction flaggers that would generally be working, doing flagging assignments. We pulled them from their flagging assignments and had them work as conductors on trains. Some of our capital folks weren't excited about that, but it's either service or the work, and sometimes you just have to provide the service. We took folks that were doing platform duty, and if you weren't restricted for a reason to a platform, you were going back to a train. So we took all those folks and put them back on trains. We did retraining for the dispatchers. So dispatchers know that when a trip is ABD'd or abandoned, they're supposed to flex the service so that the gap isn't as big. If it's a 20 minutes in between service, move up the train that's supposed to leave 10 minutes earlier, and therefore you split the gap. We had to reinforce that with the dispatchers and then put a system in place that the managers were reviewing the flexes of the dispatchers as well. We work with the crew assignment system. So we have one location that handles all of our assignment of crews. The crew assignment location does our train operators, conductors, tower operators, dispatchers, everything. And when you have limited resources, you can't use the same tricks of the trade to get by. So we had to start prioritizing what trips you start covering, looking at the ridership on specific lines during specific periods and saying, maybe I don't cover the J in this specific instance when the A is left open. But normally I would cover that job, right? Because the crew that I had, the extra crew I had, works out of that location or they're close to there. So you have to look at the utilization of your current crews. We looked at the utilization of the extra board personnel. So we have an extra board personnel. They generally we utilize them when folks have sick leave. They book off at the last minute. If a person is scheduled for some type of last minute issue and you have to try to cover the job. you have this crew of extra board people that you assign them at will. But we had so many vacancies, it didn't make sense to just leave them vacant and have them assigned at the last minute. Let's assign as many as we can up front, so that we can fill the holes that we know of. And then, some of the holes we have to kind of say, well, we know that we're going to still have some holes at the last minute. Maybe we'll still leave them at the areas, for example, on the A, which is longer. You don't want a gap in service on the A because the impact's going to be worse on the customers. So you may still leave some extra customers, extra crews to cover that portion of the run. And then we issued short-term supplemental service to on certain lines when Omicron hit to provide more consistent service as opposed to ad hoc scheduling. So now, the analytical side is one thing that I can say I have great people that work on, and I take no credit for their efforts, but they're pretty much amazing. So all of the work, what you see right there is all new. It did not exist prior to, let's say, 6-7 months ago. Essentially a breakdown of what crews you have available, monitoring the daily availability, what crews are out and for what reason, how many are out sick, how many are out workers' comp. You can forecast what you think you're going to have in terms of people coming back within a short amount of time. We investigated cancellations by time and day to make sure that we were evening out the service that we could. And if you take a look at the tool that's up top, you can see the light blue line shows the number of, for January to June, the number of folks at work. The blue line shows, the darker blue line shows other leave. The orange is for those that are sick, purple for those on vacation, and pink for those who workers' comp. So you can kind of gauge, all right, well, if I have the purples on vacation, do I have a high vacation month coming up that I need to be concerned about? Am I concerned about people booking off sick? You have a lot more tools to kind of utilize for your advantage when you're scheduling the use of your extra.
If you look at that quickly, you might think it reads friends with different absence types. Andrew.
Yeah. You can also see in the bottom right, go back one more, Lucas, you can see in the bottom right corner, those folks that are working road jobs on a daily basis, like I picked the road job versus the relief and extra jobs. The number of the pick jobs will start at the high, at the pick, and they will reduce as your attrition reduces, right? When people come in, they retire, the number starts to decrease, but then you're hiring people at the same time, so your availability on the extra side will start to increase. But I think what's more important is if you look at the so if you look at the availability, average daily employees that are available, the number itself is increasing, but not as quickly as we would like. But the next page shows the stark difference between the two, which is that our management efforts from December to May show that the reduction in crew-related delays is reduced from 632 to 372. So even though we have made some strides in terms of hiring folks, a lot of the changes that have been made in analyzing where the folks are, what they're doing, how we could reassign our extra pool population, putting some of the operational impacts in place have impacted our ability, affected our ability, and given us the ability to be able to do things a little bit better. So that's all I have. Happy to take any questions.
Now, a question, on that chart before, you showed a very high percentage of workers' comp.
Mhm.
Is that a continuing problem? Is that a previous problem, or has it always been a problem?
So we've noticed that availability, I'll speak about availability generically, has decreased. Ever since COVID, we've noticed that a number of folks are out more, and that the assaults have increased. There are a lot of folks that are out for whatever number of issues. We have a lot of spitting at conductors. Unfortunately, that is considered an assault, and a person will be out for that for a period of time. But we have seen an increase since 2019.
In terms of COVID-related illnesses, have you seen any change in absences due to COVID?
So yes, there are less COVID-related sickness or illness, more sickness or illness that are undescribed, right, other. We had a hotline set up for those to notify us when they were, in contact with someone, and those numbers have decreased substantially from the height of the pandemic. But we still haven't gotten back to where we were in terms of sick.
Thank you.
Dimitri, how are you? A little concerned, when you had the A train, and I know Andrew, you and I, and everyone else, we've been discussing, with the COVID that time, when the A was supposed to be running every 10 minutes, and it's 10 minutes, one goes to Lebanon, one goes to Far Rockaway. There are times was when you finally got the C train back, the A's were still not coming like its window. And I was glad one time you did bring the C to go to the Rockaway. But at this moment in time, even COVID or no COVID, we're still seeing them saying do the shortness, but here's the problem. It's not the crews. Sometimes I see the timing. I see how the A's are so spread out that I could be on a C train from Euclid Avenue all the way up to Times Square, and I still beat it up. Is there something we can do with the performance? Because lately, this is not the first time I've seen this many times, and the A platform on 34th Street Penn Station is getting very not safe. And a lot of people have groaning, complaining, and going, lately the C is running better, the B runs better, because lately the A, sometimes even I'm on a B train, I can beat the A all the way down.
I haven't heard anyone say the C train's running better.
Well,
I have.
Thank you.
Yes, we have, Andrew. It happens regularly.
So
Yeah, but according to Chris, it goes to Times Square. That's a good train.
I could beat I can run the C going all the way up to Times Square, and I could beat the A.
Except it doesn't go to.
It doesn't go to.
Or 42nd Street, Port Authority.
It is a connection that you can walk it underground.
Well, it could be remodeled.
Can we just?
yeah. So we looked at the A train specifically, because it's been one of our challenge lines. I think the A, the B, the F, they're all very difficult lines to run, but the A is particularly because it has so many terminals. It has so many points at which you're going to have conflicts, and it is an extremely difficult line to run, particularly when service is not normal. So even one instance where you don't have crews available has like longer impacts. We look back at, I want to say going back to, I'm definitely going to get you, Mr. X. I see you in the back.
Yeah.
I see. We look back at, I think we went as far as 2018 to see just the how the A had performed, and this is not like a short-term problem that you can immediately fix and it'd be the best thing since sliced bread. The A is a hard line to fix, but I will say that one of the things that we and that's with President Davey at the helm, we've been specifically looking at the A to say, even if I took a little bit of a hit on another line, do I have the potential to boost the A? And it's a challenge. So I'll say we started looking at the terminals, where the dropout locations on the A, because we found that locations where we have a population of transient people that are harder to get off at the dropout locations, you'd have a train literally sitting there for 15 minutes, and trains back up very quickly behind it. That also affects your ability to turn for service that's coming in the opposite direction. So we've been piloting having a supervisor and extra personnel at the terminals to try to help get folks off the train. We have had a reduction in the dwell time as a result of it. But I will say even when we get back to the place where we're fully crewed, we have some work still to do in the end.
It's a related question.
I lived in A-Line, which is Far Rockaway. I've noticed that the cars are dirty as hell. It's been dirty since the hurricane came. And no one has not put those cars through the car wash at Picking Yards or 207th Street maintenance station, maintenance yard, whatever that is.
Okay. And just the exterior you're talking about?
On the I'm talking about on the outside.
Just the exterior?
Exterior means outside cars. Yes. On the inside, they not cleaning the maintenance not cleaning the inside, but the outside.
Is it both the 46s and the 179?
Yes, both of them.
Both of them.
Yeah.
Including the one.
So I know we did have some work down there to the car wash. I'll take a look to see if there's any longer term impact. You're saying it's been like this?
It's been like this since the hurricane. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Joel, you had something that was related, and then we'll call on Mr. X. Yeah.
Yeah, I've also noticed those issues on the A, especially during the shoulder periods in the evening when you have a train drop out. And that transition period, even pre-COVID, was problematic because you have service like scheduled, like 24 minutes, like because of the split between Ozone and Far Rockaway. And with a trip dropped out, you might see a 40, 60-minute gap all the way to Ozone or Far Rockaway. And I'm be curious to know what's being done in terms of dispatching to try to address that. And also, the ridership has returned more back to the system, but even so, it's unlikely to return to 100%. We've been running basically with some modifications, some supplements, mainly the base schedule we had pre-COVID. Has there been any thought, for instance, for the A, you might not need 18 trains per hour in the peak anymore? Has there been any thought? Has there been any thought of increasing service off-peak where you have, especially see this gapped out far out on the line?
In addition to still running the base schedule.
I second that, thank you.
So I will say, and again, I won't take credit for this, one of the things that President Davey has said is we do need to look at how we operate and when our customers travel. It's clear that Mondays are different now than they were prior to the pandemic. Is there an appetite to change that? Is a very, very different question. So I'd say that I think we're amenable to change, but whether or not folks that, politicians, whether or not the rider public is really wants us to change, they would rather us just be able to deliver.
We like addition.
Yeah.
That's the kind of change we like.
Yeah.
Addition.
Because we've seen both off-peak and weekend ridership really balloon, and service hasn't ballooned to meet that. And while we're on that, and just since it's come up before, when you gave the earlier slide, it was the C and the F that had the most impact. And when we get our monthly reports at the board, they also have the worst statistics. So can't we do something to make those two lines a little bit better?
You're saying in terms of like crews?
Whatever is causing these terminal on-time performance, terrible figures, they're terrible both on weekdays and weekends.
So,
I know the F is a very long line.
That's a long line.
It's long, but it's not.
It's very long.
but the C gets jacked up because of the A as well, and how it keeps hitting the bank.
And then
especially at
I guess the verdict,
59th Street,
yeah, between West Fourth and
where
James.
it's always an issue there.
You're right.
So I think for
I
us,
was a conductor, remember? I know firsthand.
yeah.
I was a former conductor.
Where are you?
Yeah, I was.
Why'd you leave us? You know
I
we need
was
help.
assaulted.
Oh, sorry.
We'll talk about that another time. But yeah.
We need her here.
Yeah.
So, I do think that, so while we look at the A line, I do think there will be some opportunities to check out the C line, because they just kind of go hand in hand. But I think where we're trying to go is, what can we do to impact the customer, which may not necessarily be better for on-time performance, but may have a better customer perception. So, for example, in the past, we used to run gap trains. If you saw that there was a gap in service, you would fill it. It does not help you for on-time performance. It costs us money to operate it. But it does give a customer a train when there's a gap in service. Right. So we are trying to think about what we can do to change the customer perception of the service that we provide. And President Davey has been very, very amenable to ideas like that.
Mr. X.
Years ago, Frank was studied. Frank, especially in the head, about him. So far, he ran local, which was pathetic. Actually, backed up. Do you know why they're backed up? Court Street Station. You can go to Court Street Station, put those cars in the 207th Street Yard, and a local train operate to and from that station at all times. But the originating there has been a quick terminal of the express train operating above few glass only, because the courses alone were built with local service only. That's why you have backups. You didn't build the Court Street Station. Yes, I understand people want to see those finished cars. You can store them at the 207th Street Yard inside the building, and during summer only, you can store them at stations that are full of wheelchairs. Such as Kings Patrol, Anti-Football, B&D train, Astoria Boulevard, B&N train, 52nd Street, and 22nd Avenue, B&D train. Put them on the middle track if you're not using it for emergency. I mean, if you close either track, obviously trains have to use the middle track for express service, but you can do it that way. So unless until you open up the Court Street Station and let local trains use it all the time, have backups on ANC train and the South Shore Seaport, which is Los Angeles and the World Trade Center. So I'm not blaming you, I'm blaming the higher ups.
I don't mind taking the blame. I've been blamed for
I don't blame general, the blame you. Because he's the one who's killing the MTA, which sends the money going away.
So what I'll say is, we have right now a weekly meeting, both the operating folks and up to President Davey has a separate meeting where we just talk about the A line and progress that we're making. And I will agree with you that there are definitely some opportunities for doing things a little differently. But I don't think it's going to be a quick fix. I would love to be able to say, in a month's time, you will see marked progress. I don't think realistically it's possible. But I'd love to be able to say in a month's time that we have some really good ideas and to be able to implement the change.
And also Horse Street Station, we also know some unused platforms that have closed for decades at the tracks. No excuse for that.
Can I make a suggestion
Sure.
on the A-line meetings that you're having?
Mhm.
I know, I saw that you've reinstituted, or that instituted, whatever, the transit talk, the outreach meetings, which we'd love to go to, but, maybe we would, but to, travel the A-line and ask riders for their input too.
Agreed.
And you'll hear people here who do this and put a lot of brain power into it, but not the same as people who run it every day and may say, every day between this time and this time, there's a hang-up right here. And maybe that's one of those speed unit looks too.
Yeah,
You know, just from the people who endure.
yeah.
You know, those are taking it to this ground.
So I appreciate that. So he plans, Rich Davey plans on being in the field at a transit talk. He said anywhere between every 2 weeks to every 4 weeks. So it will be around the entire system. I'll recommend that we hit a station on the A soon. But I will say that one of the initiatives that the team has pulled together is they do have the ability to look at individual operating time periods and say between this location and this location, between this time period and this time period, we see trains that would normally take 4 minutes to operate through are taking 5.5 minutes. Is there something in the physical structure? Is it a school letting out at that time? Is the sun setting and therefore it's affecting the ability to operate or see things? Or is it an issue with training that we have to address? And you're right, the speed team has been actively engaged in kind of talking through some of those challenges. You know, one of the locations we identify, like literally at 3 o'clock, it's every day that the performance would decrease. So maybe we don't need platform controllers throughout the system, but maybe for the period of 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock at this location, we do need assistance in trying to get the doors closed. Maybe the train operators expressed that there was a hesitance to come into the train at the same speed because the kids are always like goofing off by the end of the platform. Those are the things that we kind of accept as the norm, but they affect our service.
Sure.
And so I think we have to, as a team, try to figure out how do you best tackle all of these little small things which all cumulatively build to where we are today.
So, you're getting a variety of perspectives from writers or transportation professionals or retired professionals. Have you done an engagement survey with the train operators or the conductors to see whether they have any service delivery suggestions? And if you did, could you share that feedback? And if not, would it be something you would consider? Because employee engagement is one of the tools we use as transportation professionals to improve operations.
So I will say, no, we have not done a formal engagement. And I think it's a great idea.
Right. I think they'll appreciate it as well. And, again, you may see this, I don't know, in the pick practices, whether you're getting, people are outright rejecting certain shifts or tours. So employee satisfaction, if they feel they're engaged and they come up with suggestions, you may see a different dispersion in how things work out too.
I think it's a great idea.
Okay, great.
To follow up to Stuart's question or comment, are the unions directly involved in all that you are doing? Or are you dealing with the workers? What is the relationship? I would assume that the unions have a say-so in everything that you're doing, but if you could go into more details about that and their involvement.
So I think there is no success without having the union involvement. It's extremely difficult to change anything, any type of culture without, having them understand where we're going and trying to get them to support it. So we do have a really good relationship with the union. I literally was on the phone with the vice chair prior to coming to this meeting. I think there are things that we agree on. We may disagree on how to get there, but we do agree with where the direction needs to go. But I think we do have a really good relationship, which could result in some positive change.
So there is an ongoing dialogue
Yes.
on all of those things. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a couple more.
Hi, when you said about you going to check the school at DeKalb Avenue at 3:00, there's Long Island University, is the, technical high school, Brooklyn, that thing. There's so many cut chase. The minutes between 2 to 4, the DeKalb Avenue, both sides, going to Manhattan and going back to Brooklyn, are packed beyond safe capacity. These persons like myself who come down to LA because of my mobility bike have a hard time getting to what's called the boarding area. And also, while we're at it, can you please have them refix the signages, because many times we can't see the time clock and where the boarding signs are because you have other signs blocking it. And it's MTA stuff, and it makes it very hard for us to maneuver. But now I will tell you, if I need to go home, actually I can get on easier when it's the regular rush hour, because the kids will move out of my way, no matter how many times they move out of my way, I say nicely. But the adults, let me get out and get over to the boarding
I
area.
would love to hear what that nicely sounds like.
Excuse me, it's an Edith Prentice thing.
I'm just like Edith in many ways. I try to be nice, but it's either move it or lose it. And I mean that. Also, I know you're talking about subways, but I just want to add, there's also another issue with when many times we get the trains, they move quick, we get to the station, we have to, but then we're stuck, there's no buses to connect, and that is a big problem. I have been stuck waiting for more than an hour because I usually try to go back to Stillwell, because I don't have to worry about the elevator being broken, because I can go down a ramp, which I wish more stations were ramped too. But I can wait an hour for a bus. And now I have the apps on, I can see it, I can ask some of the dispatchers what's going on. I don't know. It is frustrating, because I want to go home, I don't feel like hanging out in Stillwell all night until a bus comes. And no, I will not take accessible dispatch, I don't have an arm and a leg. But this is when I don't use Access Right, because I have to go out and we couldn't call them in time. But it is frustrating, and I'm not the only person who gets frustrated by this. So I would like better connections if possible.
Okay, one more
If
question.
possible.
Yes, thank you.
And also ask the bus drivers too, what's going on with them. Why are there problems too? And if you're gonna question the conductors and the train drivers, I think you need to also talk to the bus drivers, who are very frustrated after a while.
That's a different discussion with a different person.
I understand, but he can still bring it back to the people who do buses.
If the train is out.
But also, if I need a train, and train is out, as my son said, there are only certain stations I can get onto that may let me out, or I need to know where the buses are, that I can get back to my own area. Yes, I do understand where to travel, but I also gotta know, were they detoured? Because if they're detoured, that takes me away from where I really may have to connect to another train that's accessible.
Yeah, I just wondered if you're considering rethinking the loading guidelines. Currently, it's based on the peak load, and there are lines like the C and the R that cycle lot riders that have many transfer points. So, for instance, like the R train heading up to 4th Avenue, 9th Street, you might have a lot of riders getting off there, and before and between those transfer stations, it might be crowded, but because loading guidelines are determined based on the peak loading point, that service isn't added. And then there's also the fact that it's based on demand, for instance, the G historically had lower service levels than other lines, and as such, people are less likely to ride it. It's a chicken and egg situation there, and if you just determine loading guidelines based on that, as opposed to demographic factors in the neighborhood, job activity, et cetera, for instance, if you just added service to the G without count for the loading guideline, you could still see increased ridership. Have you looked at rethinking the loading guidelines?
So I'll say, we've had a couple discussions with Judy McLean and company from the operations planning group. They've looked specifically at the G, and you're right, it's one of those tough decisions because everyone says they want more service, but technically, you know, it wouldn't really, if you, yeah.
The G serve has exploded.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Adding cars would be better.
Yeah.
adding cars, yeah, that's another, that same argument has been around for a very long time. So I would say it's being discussed, but I won't commit to whether there is a different ideology at this point.
Thanks so much.
I had a question, I see we have, Davida online has one too. There's been conversations about looking, in addition to, sort of looking at changes in, I like to say, adding service to weekends and off-peak, but that then changes the way, geos would be done. There has been some, talk about technology and different uses of technology to help with geos that would speed that up, or to help facilitate faster, allowing people to work faster or better or smarter or differently. Has that changed or gone anywhere, or is that something that's still being pursued?
So, it is always a very, very difficult discussion to have because, you know, the first thing that an employee is going to say when you say faster is unsafe,
Yeah.
right? So what we've been kind of challenged with is what can we give that not just keeps safety the same, but add safety to employees, but at the same time, these increases don't add risk. And it's been a challenge. You know, we are looking at, looking for more opportunity to use things like barriers to protect the adjacent tracks, which obviously reduces the adjacent track flagging. We are looking at some technology that could alert employees when a train is coming. You know, there are a lot of things that come out that have real potential, but then you get a good distance into testing it, and it doesn't evolve to be what you thought it would be. So it is a challenge. I mean, about the increased service on the weekend, you know, it would be nice to have. My concern at this point would be, you know, if we are really strapped with resources during the peak periods, during the peak load periods during the week, and you sacrifice some of the peak load headcount to support the weekend increases, you do yourself a disservice in doing so.
So we add it all over.
Yeah. Well, it would be great, but you just don't. If we're forecasting to be, you know, full with conductors by the end of the year, but you know, train operators to the middle of next year or to the second quarter next year, it just presents a very difficult challenge if you say, okay, let's increase on the weekends, because they're going to come from the crews that you.
You know, something is a little priority at some point.
I am missing most of it, but
You want-
That's a Zoom problem. Cross line.
No,
Davida had a question. Davida had her hand raised. Davida had a hand raised. Yeah,
Oh, hello? Yeah.
David A. Davida.
Have a question. So, I can't remember where I read this at first, but I recall, during like right before the pandemic or like right during it, like around April 2020, like the MTA was considering, flipping the F and M. So the, F would go through the 53rd Street tubes and the M would go through the 63rd Street tubes. So while still going, so the F will run with an E to the Queens Boulevard Express line, and the M will take the 63rd Street line to Queens Boulevard Local. So I guess my question is, whether or not the MTA is still considering that, have they reconsidered the switch?
David, I don't know that answer. I can certainly take it back to the team to find out. I don't have the answer for you.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Andrew? Yeah, I just, because Cornelius, you mentioned something about the B train. Something that just brought to my light bulb, and this is a serious thing. There was a day that you said, there was on the email, and I know we said this a few months ago, that the B train was short, but it's kind of funny. The B train during rush hour runs like every 6 minutes, and it was running its normal routine. There is a time that I looked at it, I'm like, where are we short on Bs? I see more Bs running, and I live right where it begins between, I do get it at Kings Highway, but I know I missed one B, and then 6 minutes later, another one comes, because once the queue comes, the B's not far behind him, and they're running like clockwork. So there's a couple of times the app says the B is short, and I'm like, where's the B short? I see the D short, but not the B. And there's a couple of times you do send the B up to 205, which I never complain, because I actually say, thank God.
Yeah, so that goes to the customer message point, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, in the interest of providing information, you may provide too much information.
Yeah.
The delays may not necessarily be in your direction, or, it may not, you may be past the delay, or you could be in front of the delay.
It was during the day I was going up at that time, it said it.
Right, but it could be north of you, or it could be south of you. Doesn't mean that it's specifically in the area where you're standing at that very point. So it's been one of those challenges where it's like, we could say, don't put it up because it's not affecting everybody on the B, but then for the customers that it is affecting, we have not gotten to the point yet where we can be as specific so that we know that we're talking to you specifically, and this is only applicable to you.
I'm just used to saying it delayed due to a problem earlier, and I'm used to that.
Yeah.
But when they say short, I'm like, where's the shortness? Because I see both directions come in like clockwork, so.
Yeah, I think their methodology is, if there are two ABDs within an hour period, or some type of algorithm they use, if there's two ABDs within an hour period, but those two ABDs could have long passed you. Or you could be right there waiting, and that train is coming your way, and the two ABDs are behind that train. So you see great service, but that delay still exists out there. So it's hard to tell with that.
Yeah. Oh, no,
There's one more question online.
Carl?
Yes, my question is, a while back, I think I sent in a suggestion for the MTA to look at regarding the A-line service, back to that again, where I mentioned that if they had all the A's going from 207th Street to Lefferts Boulevard and have the Far Rockaway A train relabeled and short turn somewhere in Midtown Manhattan, like 34th Street or downtown Manhattan, west of Chambers Street. I saw some turnarounds over there. I figured it would be a greater frequency of A express trains from Far Rockaway through Brooklyn, if they could short turn the Far Rockaway branch somewhere in Midtown Manhattan or downtown Manhattan. So that was my suggestion. I wanted to know if they took a look at that. That was about a year ago or so. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have the answer for that. I'll definitely talk to Judy McLean to see if they gave any consideration to that.
I actually have a long-standing request for A service change, which is all A's going to the Rockaway and the C extends to Lefferts.
Yep.
That would be very tourist-friendly, and tourists would know everyone is going to JFK Airport. Judy McLean and I had a long talk about that, and she thinks there may not be enough cars or something to do that.
Okay.
But I think that would make a lot of sense. The people in Bell Harbor, Neponset, and Rockaway Park are the only people in the entire city relegated to shuttle-only status. If you're the Franklin shuttle, you can walk to other lines very easily. So those are the only folks, except for the 6 through trains in the rush hour. But wouldn't that be simple for tourists? Take any A train to JFK.
Fair point.
Especially when they end up on Lefferts, like, what?
I think Mr. X will be the last one.
Thank you.
Just three things, Demetrius.
Make it one thing, because we are running out of time.
Plan, road changes, posters were posted at the station, not anymore, have to log on to the website. So is disappointing. Okay, when the summer trains are running, we have to ride a bus. The powers that be should give them a block ticket right there and then, not what the hell they get a voucher with. When we run a G train, there was always a shortening. Half of the B division trains could run during rush hour, half could run during non-rush hour. There's more cars of the G train. There's no reason why I can't carry the full train length, then the C train. But what I can do is I can do my testimony, which I sent months ago, and you'll see what it was.
Thank you, Mr. X. Thank you. Demetrius, thank you so much
you.
for this. And help sort this out for us.
I appreciate it. And I think,
Hopefully you're not tired of my emails all the time.
and he sends so many emails, so just want you guys to know it. If you ever want to reach me, send it to him.
That is turnabout and fair play.
So I'll just say, I mean, I think it's forums like this that really do make a change. You know, it's people that are really interested in transit and transportation as a whole. And you just don't get stuff done unless, you know, we can have great ideas, but can't have them all. So I appreciate all your input. And, you know, Lucas is online. He's jotting down everything that you guys say, and anything that we can action will definitely be action. So much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I don't know, am I allowed to take that? Will they come after me for that?
Everybody will notice.
Thank you.
We have, 3 minutes.
That's what we have, 3 minutes. Old
Happy
business.
birthday, Trudy.
Thank you.
Did we ever?
Wait, Trudy, hold on.
1 minute, sorry, before you went, the brown bag, the
New
brown bag.
business.
No, you know I have to do it.
Yeah, but we have to
We'll
get
do it really quickly, yeah. Thank you. Your birthday is coming up, so we just wanted to get.
hitting a big number, and we wanted her to have.
Happy birthday
to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Trudy. Happy birthday to you.
You know that I'm a chocoholic, so thank you.
I'll answer in the morning.
Just so you know, this is a biggie.
Yes, I know, we know. We would have put a candle fire, you ran out of time, but you just keep the bag and you can carry it with you.
No, thank you. I don't need it.
Okay.
Because I have to go, I have another meeting that I have to go to.
Okay, I do too, so,
Did we ever
But
hear
thank
back?
you all, and I will have another, God knows how long I just realized that I have been with the PCA. I ran into, I don't know how many of you remember Dick Ravage. Yeah, but I ran into Dick the other day, and we compared notes his birth, we're both born under the same sign, which says something, or maybe doesn't say something. He's a lot older than I am. Dick is going to turn 90 in July. And when I told him I was going to turn 80, he said, no, it can't be. And I said, it can't be.
80, God bless everybody.
But he asked for all of you. So much appreciated. And one of
Happy
these
birthday,
days-
Trudy.
Happy birthday. We'll bring him here so that he can meet everybody.
Have a happy birthday.
Happy
Take
birthday.
care.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Stay well. Andrew, I only have one thing to
Old
say.
business.
It's easy, and everyone might kill me, but I don't care. Happy 8832, and I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Did we ever hear back on station?
Sorry, Stuart.
Did you have something?
Old business.
Sorry.
Did we ever hear back on station cleaning schedules or?
I had tried to get the head of stations here today to answer lots of station questions, and he wasn't available. I'm still trying.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So I second his motion.
All right.
All right.
That was quick.
Okay, thank you all. If you have any, follow-up questions, please let us know.
I just wanted to say happy 8832.
Andrew.
I